feel your body suddenly get drawn quickly down a space similar to stepping through these doorways before.
To the taint.
You stop, standing in a cavernous, dark chamber. You have no idea where the walls are. It is too open with the little light you have.
I look down. What's on the floor?
Stone, your gravity has taken you now.
Holding we're standing
Right.
at fire.
When you light the space around you, can see distant sconces of burning torches and candelabras set in the center. All you do see is a small, arranged set of tables in the middle of this wide.
That's it.
Let's roll pick.
What is it? Off the map! We're off the map! We're off the map!
You guys are off the map now.
We're off the map!
Why did we do this? I'm sick. I'm sick. My arm hurts.
This is all you're doing.
It's 5 minutes.
Hello everyone and welcome to round 9 of the 2021 Tata Steel Chess Tournament in a game between Magnus Carlsen and Niels Grandelius. Niels is leading the tournament for the first part of the tournament, but then he lost a few games. But he has a very colorful tournament. He already has 3 wins and 2 losses to Anipiri and Hari Krishna, but now he faces world champion Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus suffered his first defeat in the previous round. We checked out that game. It was quite a beauty. If you haven't seen it, I will put it in the description below, so check it out, as it's just awesome. And now it's interesting to see what Magnus will choose with the white pieces to try and get back into the tournament, as he now most definitely needs the win. He won only the first game. He played against Alireza in the tournament and then had a series of draws before losing in the previous round. So without further ado, let's check out what happened to us this game. We have a lot to cover. So Magnus with the white pieces opens with e4 and Niels opts for c5. So again, we'll see if we will again have the Najdorf on the board, and can the Najdorf even survive one game in this tournament. So knight, that's not a knight to f3, d6 and d4. Striking the center, captures, knight to f6, knight to c3 and a6. Again, the Najdorf Sicilian is on the board, and let's see what Magnus chooses here. So whenever we show a game that was played in the Najdorf, I often mention that bishop e3, bishop g5, bishop e3, e4 are the absolute top 4 moves that you play in this position. But there are plenty of other moves. You can play h3, h4, you can play f3, you can play even g4, you can play a3, you can play a4. So a lot of moves are possible here, but Magnus goes for an extremely rare queen to d3. And this is so rare that Niels really started thinking in this position, because this is something you don't encounter quite often. And I remember when I was thinking about what you could use against the Najdorf if you were playing against someone who plays the Najdorf, queen to d3 does not come up all that often. So here Magnus wants to surprise Niels with this, and let's see what's the idea behind queen to d3, because for the moment it looks like it's just blocking that bishop on f1. So let's see what was Carlsen's idea. Niels continues with e6, which is a standard move in this setup, very nicely done. We have a4 by Magnus, stopping black's expansion here on the queen side. Knight to c6, and here Magnus straight. Knight captures, b captures, black now gets a massive pawn chain here in the center, and now queen to g3. And this is the idea behind queen to d3, shifting the queen over to g3, where you still have pressure on the d6 pawn, but also you are preventing black from developing the dark over bishop. And here there is one game in the database, a top level game between Grigori Oparin and Boris Yeltsin, where d5 was played. The game ended in a draw. It was a blitz game in 2017, played in Zurich. But here we have bishop to b7, and it is as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Carlsen deals with bishop to b7. Also very interesting here is h5. I'm just going to show it because it is interesting. It threatens h4, and it does appear to be the top idea against this queen to g3 line. Of course, white will play h4, and now bishop to e7, and black continues the development and captures next, because the g7 pawn is not something you want to grab. If you grab this, rook to g8, queen h6, and now d5, and it's black who will have you know, a very pleasant game. He has the semi-open g file for the rook. He has this massive center, and it's very easy for him to bring the pieces into the game. I'm just going to show one funny line: e5. Rook to b6 kicks away the queen, queen f4, and now rook to g4. Again, chases away the queen, and after the queen moves, now you shift the knight from b6, and it's under attack, captures with the check, and now king d1, and this is complete madness on the board, so who knows what's happening. So, okay, that's kind of the idea behind h5, but Niels went for bishop to b7, and now Magnus continues developing. Bishop to e2. And you'll see how nicely this bishop is placed on e2 with bishop to e7, now offering the g7 pawn, but now of course you don't capture it. If queen captures again, rook to g8, and we get a fairly similar position with this bishop already developed on b7. So Magnus ignores that and plays bishop to f4. Now saying I'm preparing to push e5, and if you want to stop that, you have to play e5 yourself. Point is, if Niels just castles and allows this e5 move, it's a very dangerous idea, because white will have this pressure here constantly on the g7 pawn, and not a lot black can do about that. So instead, after bishop to f4, Niels blocks it with e5. Magnus goes back, bishop to e3, and now Niels castles. And here, situation on the clock is Magnus has an hour and 20 minutes on the clock, so he wasted very little time here, whereas Niels is below 1 hour clock point at some 58 minutes. And here we have castle by Magnus. He also decides to castle kingside, and now king to h8. King to h8, you wanna free the king away from this diagonal, as at some point you wanna move this knight, you wanna push the f5 pawn, so king to h8 definitely makes sense. And you don't want to have your king on g8 constantly worrying about moves like bishop to h6, that will of course attack your king pawn. So king to h8. And for this king to h8 move, Niels spent some 20 minutes, so that's, you know, he's burning time like crazy here. We have a5 by Magnus, grabbing more space on the queen side. Now ideas like bishop to b6 become possible, knight can come to a4 and then to b6. So again, a little bit more for Niels to worry about. But Niels sticks to his plan. He goes knight to d7, prepares this f5 thrust, and here Magnus brings more firepower to the d file. Rook f to d1, and now we have f5 by Niels. And this is a wonderful idea, because Magnus captured it and Niels just played d5. So he temporary pawn sacrifice to increase his activity in the center, because if you go after this pawn, then white has all sorts of tricky ideas like queen to h3, now attacks this, puts pressure on h7. If you move the rook, bishop to c4, attacks the rook here, and now it's a crazy position where if black decides to go d5, you can even give up a piece here. Captures, bishop captures, rook captures, and now there's a double attack on the knight, and there's no way to defend this. If bishop to f8, you defend it like this, just rook 8 to d1, and that's just no more options here. The knight is attacked 3 times, and even this is covered by the bishop, so you cannot defend against this. So you'd have to move the queen, but then just capture. And white is having an amazing position. If queen captures on c2, going after the rook here, you just kick the rook back to d2, push the queen away, and you enjoy a better position. So instead, after e captures on f5, we have this d5 move by Niels, also with ideas of pushing d4. And here Magnus also went into a think, and he played knight to a4, which has been an idea from the start. You want to get the knight over to b6, but I'm just going to show just for fun, because I know you guys enjoy it so much, a funny line that starts with queen to h3. Here again, you're again having a lot of pressure on the knight, on the h7 pawn, and also you are inviting black to play d4. But if black goes for this d4 idea, you're gonna play bishop to c1, and now the knight is off limits. Black needs to figure out what black will play, because if you capture the knight, then just f6 and white wins. So simple as that, because now there's a double attack here. The bishop is under attack, and even with the best reply, let's say captures, bishop captures, and now bishop to c8, you just move the bishop and add another defender to the knight, captures, and now let's say queen to g3, and it's an amazing position for white. This bishop is a monster, the rooks are very nice to play, the other rook can come into the game very easily, and it's a beautiful position for white, like I said. But okay, instead of that, after d5, Magnus moves knight to a4, he wants to play this knight on b6, and now comes, well, d4, and what happens now? So the bishop is under attack, Magnus has to move it. We have d2 and now even c5, so opening up the light square diagonal and preparing to bring the rest of the pieces into the game. The f5 pawn still under attack, Magnus plays queen to h3, defends the pawn and again puts some pressure here, maybe he can bring some of the attackers into the game, but now comes bishop to g5, challenging this bishop here, and well, if Magnus trades, then Niels just gets his queen into the game. So here, after considering the position for a while, Magnus decides to trade here. We have queen captures, and now rook to e1. And here, the situation on the clock is 28 minutes Magnus and 23 minutes Niels. Well, it's just a very tough position to play. The g2 pawn is under attack by the bishop and the queen. The rook can come into the game. Rook is going to capture on f5. You can then double up rook here, and Magnus really needs to decide how to play this. So here, Magnus goes bishop. First Niels goes bishop to e4. It just goes after this pawn. Says that this wasn't maybe the best idea, and now Magnus counters that with bishop to d4. So Niels picks up the pawn. We have bishop captures and rook captures on f5 now, clearing the fa square for the other rook, and now knight to d6, asking, do you want to play something weird like a rook to d8, or do you want to trade on b6 and then I will get a nice pass pawn? So here Niels decides to take on b6. We have knight captures on b6, a captures on b6, and now h6, just creating some breathing room for the king, saying that this is not a problem at any point. It's just attackers here. If this pass pawn, it's not going to survive very long. So here Magnus plays queen to d3, now with a double attack on the a6 pawn, and Niels says no problem, I'm just going to play rook to b8. If you're thinking about this sort of a counter attack with rook to f8, it does seem like it's very nice, but after rook to f1, there's not all that much for black to do. You can go queen f6 to triple on the f-file, but just b7 now is very strong, and now you cannot capture on f2 because of b8 queen, and now whatever you play, white will definitely come out on top. Captures, and there's nothing much for you to do. Queen capture here, you're going to capture here, and one of the queens remains on the board. It's of course completely winning for white. So after this b7 move, you'd have to play something else. You'd have to play something like c4, but then after queen captures on c4, now you can capture on f2. But it's a really tricky line that in the end just, for example, captures on f2. You can bring a queen into the game. Now requires you to go for this rook captures and g2 check. King captures and g2, and now queen to g6 check, and it's a very crazy line. If king goes here, queen to e4 with check, and then it's just a forced draw. So it is possible to go for something like this after rook a to f8, but Niels decides to go for rook to b6, just blocking that pawn. Magnus grabs on a6, and now comes rook to f6, saying, okay, I'm now going to pick up the b pawn, and there's not much you can do about it. Point is, if Magnus goes for something like queen to b5 to defend this pawn, then queen d2 is very annoying. This is threat, and this is threat, and this is threat, and you now have to go back, and then after a queen trade, you just pick up the pawn, and it's a completely equal position. So instead, after rook to f6, Magnus goes g3. He prepares a very sneaky line after the pawn is captured. We have rook f captures and b6, rook captures, and now f4. And this is what Magnus had in mind when he played this g3 move. But the problem for Niels is that Niels is very low on time here. But you're comfortable at home, so feel free to pause the video and try to find the only good move for Niels here while I give you a couple of minutes. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the move. We already saw the move once in this game for similar reasons, so prepare yourselves. And for those of you who just want to show, it's c4. This is the only good move for white here. Point being that after the queen captures on c4, you can now capture on f4. and now the point is the queen is no longer here guarding the h7 square, and now after this check is delivered, it's not checkmate, you can move the king, and now even after queen to g8 check, king to g6, there is no good reply here. For example, rook e6 check, captures, check, and black just plays queen f6, amazingly this captures, the g captures on f4, king here, and now b4, but after king captures, you can see that the king is well within the square of the pawns. It's not a problem for the black king to reach this past pawn, and then black will start reaching his pawn. In the end, it's going to be a draw, but this is in the position after this f4. So it's really hard to find, especially with such little time on the clock. So Niels went back with the queen, but this means that Magnus will now win the pawn. So here, rook captures on e5, rook captures on b2, and now rook captures on c5. Now Magnus is up the pawn, and he will, of course, try ideas like queen f5, go after this position from the thumbnail, maybe win the queen, maybe end the game quickly. So here, queen to a8, with some ideas of rook b1 check, maybe you can do something with this setup, but Magnus goes for the absolute best, king to f2, not allowing anything to come with the check, and you don't really have all that many great options here. And here, Carlsen has some 8 minutes on the clock, and Niels has some 55 seconds. So here we have rook back to b8, not allowing any tricks along the back rank, and now queen to f3. Now Magnus offers a queen trade, and you cannot go into this rook and pawn and king endgame because the black king is just too far away. So here queen to a7, and now queen to d5 by Magnus, saying that okay, now I might even win another pawn, and it's going to be very hard for you to play this. Now there was this sneaky d3 in the position. It kind of makes things tough for white, because after c captures, you opened up this diagonal. You can now go queen b6, threaten ideas like this, but white is still up 2 pawns, so black will have a very difficult time defending this, but it was possible. However, after queen b5, we have queen to a1 by Niels, and now Magnus finds queen to e5, puts pressure on the rook here, and prepares some very nasty stuff with the rook along the 6th and 7th rank. So here, queen to b2, defending the rook, now rook c6, threatening to capture the pawn here, because the g pawn is pinned. So king h7, Niels of course defends against this, now rook to c7, threatening checkmate. So rook to g8, and now finally Magnus decides to bring the king somewhat closer to safety with king to g2. If Magnus didn't want to play too safe, for example, f5, f6 is in the position, but he wants to get his king to safety. He had too many draws, and he even lost the game in the previous round to mess this one up, so he wants to play this one by the book. So here we have queen to b4, and now comes queen to e4 check, king to h8, and the rook to d7. This is what Magnus goes for. He says everything is nicely defended. Sorry, I'm now going to win this pawn, and then I'm just going to be up 2 pawns, and you don't really have an active move here. But he will have to calculate some of the checks after queen to d2. And this is exactly what Niels goes for. Queen to d2 check, king h3, and queen to d1 now, preparing to maybe do some sneaky attacks from behind. But here Magnus just plays rook to e7. Now it's very interesting. Magnus goes rook to e7 with the idea of trading rooks, but it's always dangerous to go for a queen endgame, because those are the absolute hardest games to play. Queen endgames being up a pawn, it's like you have to play it to perfection to actually make use of that extra pawn. Here Magnus had the very promising king to h4, but it requires too much calculation in an already sort of a winning position. But I will show it because it's very interesting. King h4, and now you're pretty much out of check, so you don't have to worry about queen to h5 anymore, but you have to worry about the g5 check. And now the point is, after captures, you go back. King to h3, your only move, and now after queen f1 check, king to g4. Now you're gonna go queen to d1 check, but now queen f3, and now you have to trade queens, otherwise queen f6 check, and it's game over. So here you have to trade, and now you have a winning endgame for white. Even though you're just up 1 pawn, I'm just going to show how easily winning it is. For example, rook c8, black wants to collect some pawns. White says, okay, you're welcome to collect those pawns, and if you collect those pawns, it captures. rook captures king g6, it's game over. Black is getting checkmated, and that's it. Nothing for black to do here. So king h4, very sneaky move. It was in the position. Magnus decides to go the longer route. He wants to trade rooks and then play the most hated endgame there ever was, the queen and pawn endgame. So here we have queen to h5 check, king to g2, and now rook back to c8, putting pressure along this c file. So white has to be somewhat careful with the queen. But now Magnus, as he cannot trade anymore, this is covered by the queen and by the rook. He goes f6. The idea, f5. The idea, of course, is f6, pawn captures, and queen to h7 checkmate. And Niels needs to find something to defend against this. So he finds queen to d1, now threatening to pick up this pawn. But now Magnus goes for rook to e8 check. I'm just going to show what Niels had in mind. If Magnus continued with this f6 idea, then Magnus would lose the game, because after rook captures on c2 with check, king h3,